Greetings from Florida, and thank you for allowing me to deliver my presentation for the first International Conference of Aphorists virtually. Let me begin by saying I deeply regret that I cannot be with you in person in the land of Miloš, that great poet and lover of aphorisms, who understood that the purpose of poetry is to remind us how difficult it is to remain just one person. My gratitude to the distinguished organizers for this generous invitation and for creating this gathering of kindred spirits devoted to the ancient art of distilled wit and wisdom. My own aphorisms and what aphorisms mean to me has changed over the years. But perhaps that's part of the purpose of aphorisms, to serve as a catalog of our mental and emotional development. What has remained constant is that amid the chaos of our lives, personal and political turmoil, aphorisms act as a reminder of what is indestructible in us, in our world, and, forgive my metaphysics, beyond. Mercifully, when I began aphorizing, can that be a verb? Over 3 decades ago, there was no internet. As a precocious teenager growing up in Egypt, I was afforded great pools of uninterrupted time to read, think, and when I got lucky, to produce an aphorism, maybe in the margin of a book, talking back to the author, or on a napkin next to my bedside. In our age of digital noise, shallow discourse, and the cult of immediacy, I've come to view aphorisms as an act of resistance, almost a form of spiritual activism. A single sentence, properly honed, might serve as an antidote to the poisons of distraction and despair. In their distilled form, these poetic, philosophic one-liners force us to slow down and consult with our inner life. At the risk of melodrama, I will say that those who fully grasp our imperiled existence understand the need for transformation. In our own disjointed times, the aphorism regains this ancient role. It offers the reader a mirror, sometimes dark, sometimes clear, a companion on the interior path. When I first began writing aphorisms in my late teens, it felt, frankly, anachronistic, like someone speaking in an archaic language. In those early days, I knew only a precious few contemporary practitioners, American poet James Richardson, primarily, and British philosopher Alain de Botton, both of whom I reached out to in my early 20s, and both of whom enthusiastically mentored me long distance and generously shared their contacts, agents, etc. A decade later, in my early 30s, when I was finally ready to publish my first book of aphorisms, I was thrilled to be approached by James Geary. Yes, that James Geary, in connection to being included in his seriously fun Geary's Guide to the World's Great Aphorists. Thank you, Jim, for all you've done and continue to do for aphorisms and aphorists. I am not today the person I was 3 decades ago. Who is? My early aphorisms were shaped by the sharp wit of Wilde, the amoral provocations of Nietzsche. As a rebellious, questing teenager, my early aphorisms were more aesthetic gestures or mind games. Yet beneath the cloudy surface stirred a deeper longing. I sought a poetry like prayer, and prayer like poetry. Then and now, I cannot write an aphorism on command, the way I might be able to do an essay or a presentation like this one. I was drawn to these brief utterances out of necessity. Aphorisms were, then and now, the echoes of my silences, or what I thought was worth quoting from the soul's dialogue with itself. At around the same time, Wilde's decadent picture of Dorian Gray sent my world spinning as a 15-year-old, I fell under the inescapable influence of moral philosopher Khalil Gibran. I say inescapable since my father is Lebanese and reading Gibran is almost a rite of passage. But I didn't just read his prophet. I devoured his letters, and his collection of aphorisms, Sand and Foam, had a lasting impact on me. In contrast to Wilde's, Gibran's version of the importance of being earnest bypassed intellect and went straight to the heart. When God threw me, a pebble, into the wondrous lake, I disturbed its surface with countless circles. But when I reached the depths, I became very still, he says. Growing up in Cairo, Egypt, a love of language suffused my world. Even though a large percentage of the population were illiterate, they spoke in sayings. For example, knowledge is what's in your head, not in your notebooks. Since childhood, I overheard proverbs as street poetry and philosophy, transmitting psychological and moral insight across generations. I grew up hearing such aphorisms from both my grandmothers, a string of sing-songy, witty-wise remarks for just about every occasion. I was even named after my paternal grandfather, Yahia Lababidi, a poet, musician whose bloodline delivered to me a love of song that hinted that the literary life might be my calling. Words of wisdom are not stolen, they're borrowed until we make them our own. Of course, I didn't fully realize at that tender age the full weight of this cultural inheritance. Nor did I know that much of the power of Gibran was influenced by Blake's ecstatic visions and Nietzsche's darkly prophetic work, both of whom I would encounter and wrestle with shortly after, as guides urging me towards the unseen. It was in middle age that I was handed over to the Persian masters, Rumi, Hafiz, Attar, who taught me that poetry may be both sensual and sacred, a love letter addressed to the divine. Exploring Sufi literature more deeply, notably Al-Hujwiri's astonishing Revelation of the Veiled, I discovered how poetry and prayer may flow as one stream. Perfection of one's art and purification of the heart move together. Strangely, though I was now based in the USA, I found myself returning home spiritually. As I mined Sufi literature more deeply, especially Ibn Atallah, an Egyptian mystic who lived in the 13th and early 14th century and wrote tremendous, edifying aphorisms which I still consult today. From Ibn Atallah's magisterial Book of Wisdom, I learned, quote, "How can the laws of nature be ruptured for you, so that miracles result, when you, for your part, have yet to rupture your bad habits?" And another, empty your heart of alterities and creatures, and you will fill up with Gnostic intuitions and mysteries. These maxims remain my companions as I write and as I live. Encountering Rilke helped me to bridge this world and the next, reminding me that political activism alone does not suffice. Spiritual revolution is needed. As Rilke writes, whoever does not accept at some time the dreadfulness of life with a firm resolve, even to the point of rejoicing in it, will never possess the unsayable power of our being and will pass to the margins. The aphorist's task was to confront the dreadfulness with clarity, humility, and when possible, even rejoicing. The page in that light becomes a prayer mat. True aphorisms were no longer about mere cleverness, but vessels, or baraka in Arabic, meaning blessings, and their healing words or praise could be nourishment for others. I've always been interested in interfaith dialogue and how truth agrees with itself across time and traditions. In mystical wisdom of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zen, Taoism, brief utterances hold a privileged place. The Koran, the Hadith Qudsi, the Desert Fathers all offered profound aphorisms that served as food for hungry souls to savor in silence. At the risk of immodesty, I long to contribute in some small fashion to this time-honored sum of human knowledge. I realized that to kneel and marvel was the proper posture of such an aphorist. Wisdom, if it ever arrived in glimpses, could hardly be said to be earned. Rather, it was a grace, received as a gift, as one bowed before the mysteries. Permit me at this point to share some aphorisms of mine from a forthcoming collection. We read and write books because we forget what we know. Tread lightly, like someone crossing quicksand, purposefully, gingerly, like a dancer. Purify yourself, and the world will follow. The punishment of the oppressor is that they're denied poetry. Beyond political activism, there is cultural activism, and beyond that, spiritual activism. When you despair of this world, remember there is another. Pain has its own time zone. We cannot heal our wounds without heeding spiritual laws. Silence is the midwife of revelation. Each of these utterances paradoxically exists in between the tension of self-forgetting and remembrance. In our cynical time, suspicious of the life of the spirit and humility, the aphorist seeks to offer gentle reminders, such as these. Here's more aphorisms of mine. The pursuit of any ideal without discernment becomes grotesque. Truths are living entities that, if delivered prematurely, will be deformed, or worse, stillborn. Such short meditations are intended to invite contemplation and transport the reader elsewhere. Here's another. Writing is merely a cover for a secret mission that even the writer is hardly aware of. Today, as aphorisms seem to be enjoying a revival, at once assisted and thwarted by social media's shortened attention span, I sense a deeper thirst for words that cut through the clutter and address our spirit. Here's another aphorism of mine. Social media, poison and its antidote. Here's another aphorism. Look closely, you will find poison and its antidote on the same shelf. Gathered here, seekers and distillers of truth, we honor the power of the condensed and the essential. As you know, language at its finest does not merely describe our world, it helps re-enchant it. In our era of mass distraction, brevity can cast a spell and become reverence. Here's another aphorism of mine. Aphorisms are like seeds carrying entire orchids. I'm forgetful, and I turn to private illumination, my own aphorisms, to remember how to proceed. Here are more aphorisms of mine. If we approach life and others with awe, we are less likely to destroy them. To create is how the artist communes with the divine. To improve your self-dialogue, improve your God dialogue. As I reflected on this esteemed gathering, a first international conference of aphorists, I am struck by the irony that aphorists are by nature solitary creatures. Yet here we are, drawn together, a brotherhood of solitaries, honoring the power of the precise, the spare, and the essential. I will end with two more of my aphoristic consolations. The work of the poet is to help us forgive ourselves, others, and the world. In the midst of the fire, continue to write with hands of steel. Thank you, intimate strangers, for the honor of your attentions, and may your gathering be as elegant and eloquent as your sentences.